Hey there, Legal Tea listeners. This is your host, Jenny Roselle. Today's episode of Legal Tea is a cautionary tale where we talk about real-life cases, real-life clients, real-life facts. They are things me or my office have actually worked on. And for today's episode, we're going to be talking about, drumroll please, disinheriting people. You would not be surprised to learn that I meet and help a lot of people that want to disinherit someone. Most of the time it's a kiddo, most of the time it's a child, though it of course is sometimes others like siblings, parents, other family members. But yeah, like I said, it's usually a child, and oftentimes the child is estranged or problematic or both. And I get it. Talking about the elephant in the room stuff is not fun, especially when sharing it with someone like a lawyer. It's not fun, but it's really important. So if someone shares with me that they have someone in their life that is estranged or problematic, and however problematic is defined for them, right? Then we're frequently talking about how to disinherit that person. So for this Cautionary Tales episode, let's talk about disinheriting people and what people have done to disinherit someone through an estate plan. Really, the theme that you should take away from both, it's 3 stories, is that the client at issue discussed with the estate attorney, which in a couple of the stories was my client, or was my office, I should say, discussed how to ensure the person they were disinheriting did not have a leg to stand on. So starting with story number 1, let's call the client Margaret. So Margaret had 2 children, namely 2 daughters. And when Margaret did her estate plan originally, she'd included both daughters, 50-50 equal beneficiaries. Well, years passed, and Margaret had experienced some things with one daughter in particular that she just could not get over. Like, for example, the daughter had repeatedly asked her to borrow money and, of course, never paid her back. Or another example is the daughter's spouse and Margaret did not get along at all. So Margaret ultimately just got fed up with things, and she came to the hard decision to disinherit that daughter. She comes into my office and we talk about how to accomplish this. Ultimately, we ended up doing a few things. So first, we modified her estate plan documents to remove the daughter and ensured that she make sure that she modify any and all beneficiary designations as she saw fit, like, aka to remove the daughter as she was the one that she was wanting to disinherit. Second, we also put in a disinheritance clause in her estate plan, in her trust. I always warn clients that the language is a little strong, but it needs to be strong to protect what she was trying to accomplish. So we included, in much more legalese, like a, hey, we didn't forget about you, daughter. You're actually just legally disinherited. And third, we also actually had Margaret write a handwritten note explaining her decision. She sealed the letter in an envelope and we put it in our physical file until Margaret passed away. We honestly had no idea what it said. But what Margaret had asked us to do was to give it to this daughter when she passed away. So fast forward a handful of years, Margaret passes away. We meet with the daughter that was not disinherited, and that's who Margaret had made as her executor and trustee in her estate plan. She was so nervous, I tell you. She was so terrified what her sister would do and say and think. Though if there's somehow a silver lining, she was really not close to her sister and really had no relationship at all. So in the meeting, we worked out what the next steps were, how to notify her sister, what would happen if her sister reared an ugly head, etc. And one of the things we discussed was that I would have my office call her sister to pick up the letter that her mother had written. So that time came. The disinherited daughter comes into my office. We sit her in a conference room, hand her the envelope, and I kid you not, the daughter looks at us dead in the eyes and rips the letter in half and walks out the door. It's hands down one of the most unbelievable things I've ever seen go down. It was so emotionless. To no one's surprise, the disinherited daughter calls a lawyer. We talked to the lawyer, explained that Margaret had disinherited their client, and P.S., don't even go here because Margaret was without a doubt of sound mind when she did everything. And guess what? We never heard from that lawyer or the sister again. So it worked beautifully. So let's discuss another story about disinheriting people. Story number 2. Okay, so another family, of course. This time it was a gentleman, and let's call him Jim. So Jim, too, had an estate plan, and he had several kiddos, I think like 6 or 7. Well, I got involved with Jim and family after Jim had been diagnosed with very advanced dementia. Therefore, it's probably kind of crazy for you to think about, but I actually never worked with Jim on Jim's stuff. I worked with Jim's power of attorneys, who was his son and daughter, and Jim had one child that he was super estranged from. And I'm not even sure, my memory's kind of failing me, or maybe I was just never told why, which it doesn't really matter. I'm not sure if Jim had disinherited this one child in his estate plan for like a particular reason. Like, I don't know what the backstory was in him doing so. But nonetheless, he had expressly disinherited this kiddo. Like, called the child out and said, hey, I didn't forget about you. You get nothing. So fast forward some time again. Sadly, Jim passes away. And again, I was working with the son and daughter, who are now the executors and trustees of their dad's estate plan. And like my last story, we brought them in too to figure out what the next steps were. So of course, we talked a little bit about the child that was disinherited, but not too much, because they were pretty confident that their sibling knew that he was disinherited and that he probably wouldn't cause a stink. Well, some time passes, maybe like a few weeks or a month, and my office gets a call from another lawyer who I happen to know pretty well. And that lawyer was calling in regards to Jim's estate. I honestly thought my team wrote something down wrong, and maybe the lawyer was calling about something else and just kind of, got this client's name attached to this lawyer, like mistakenly. Anyway, so I give that lawyer a call and say, hey, Matt, how can I help you? And he said, hey, Jenny, well, I have a prospective client who said that his dad passed away and he hasn't been told anything about the estate. And if you're thinking, oh no, it's the disinherited kid, you're right. So Matt, the lawyer, thankfully, is a solid good guy and solid good lawyer, and basically was asking, without really coming out and asking, if the case was even worth him taking. So I very quickly said, Matt, I hate to burst your bubble, but Jim had a rock-solid estate plan, and the guy who called you is very expressly disinherited in the document. And Matt replied, okay, well, do you want me to call this guy back, or do you want to call him back? And I was like, well, I have absolutely no reason to talk to him, so you can. So he laughed and said, I've had a pretty bad day, Jenny, so I don't mind being the bearer of bad news. And kind of like my last story, I never heard from Matt on that case, the lawyer, or that disinherited child again. Thank goodness. We're 2 for 2, right? So finally, for another story number 3. And this case is actually a little different than the last 2 that I've shared. This one, the person disinheriting the child, is very much still alive today. And heck, doing wonderful. So I'm sure you're like, what in the heck are you talking about this person for, Jenny? Well, they've done something that I thought would be a really helpful little nugget to share on here. So let's call her Kathy. Kathy has had a very on-again, off-again relationship with one of her children, her daughter specifically. And as they go on again, off again, we usually hear from Kathy to make changes to her estate plan. So when they're on, the daughter is in the plan. And when they're off, the daughter is out of the plan. Though this last time seems to be kind of the classic, straw that broke the camel's back, because I'm not sure if we'll see Kathy put the daughter back in, given what the daughter did. But anyway, so Kathy comes in to discuss removing her daughter as a beneficiary. And in that conversation, Kathy expressed genuine concern about her daughter trying to claim that Kathy, was not in kind of the right frame of mind to make these type of legal changes. After all, Kathy was in her early 80s, and as we all know, as we age, it's more ripe for someone to make a claim that we were of unsound mind, under duress, or whatever, and that whatever they did to their estate plan should not govern since they were, not of sound mind. Kathy was super concerned about that. We knew she was totally fine. Like, my office knew she was totally fine. She obviously knew she was totally fine, but her concern was really legitimate. I often tell people that anyone can sue anyone at any time for anything. So yeah, if her daughter wanted to cause a stink, sure, she could try. So we bounced some ideas back and forth and ultimately came to the conclusion that we would have Kathy visit her doctor and have the doctor confirm in writing that she is suffering no kind of cognitive impairment. And that way, if the daughter tried to claim that Kathy was, off her rocker, we'd have the doctor saying, "Oh no, she wasn't." I think that idea is brilliant, especially as we age and we make changes to our estate plan. So if you or a loved one have a similar concern, feel free to snag this idea. So yeah, these 3 stories that I just shared are all very real. They are very real life examples of disinheriting people, specifically my clients, that it's worked out, so far beautifully. As I said at the beginning, the beautiful thing in all 3 of these stories is that the client had a solid estate plan to protect their wishes. Can you even imagine the saga that would have occurred if these people just stayed silent in their estate plan? Or have no estate plan? Or gave the disinherited person $1? Which, speaking of that, I should just nip that in the rear right now. When you give someone, and that's a very common thing that I sometimes will hear people bring up. When someone gives a beneficiary that they are intending to disinherit $1, you are actually making them a legal beneficiary of the estate. And beneficiaries are entitled to things that non-beneficiaries are not entitled to. Like an accounting, for example. Do you really want someone you're trying to disinherit get an accounting of what assets are in the estate, what's come in, what's gone out? No. And that's just one example of many that I could give. So let me be loud and clear. Leaving $1 in your will or trust is just a really silly thing to do. Don't do it. Just talk to an estate planning attorney to have them help guide you on how to appropriately protect what your wishes are. You're just going to have to trust me on that one. Alrighty, let's wrap this episode up and shift to a sneak peek of next week. We are back to the current events, current trends topic, where we talk about something I've seen or run across, maybe on the news or social media, that I think would be interesting to talk about on here. So during next week's episode, we're going to be talking about the well-known story about Gabby Petito and her boyfriend, Brian Laundrie. And if the names aren't really ringing a bell for you, they are the couple that they were traveling the country together. Gabby went missing, was ultimately found dead, and then after a manhunt for Brian, he was found dead. Well, I happened to catch some headlines talking about this story and specifically some estate stuff going on with this case. So let's talk about it. Until next Tuesday, Legal Tea listeners, take care, be well, and happy holidays.